It is 12:40 in the afternoon on Wednesday, March 18th, 1925. In the rugged, forested hills of Shannon County, Missouri, farmer Helen Thompson spots something unusual in the sky. She sees a small condensation funnel racing north through the countryside. In the next 3.5 hours, that funnel will become the deadliest tornado in American history. It will travel 219 miles across 3 states at speeds exceeding 70 miles per hour. It will kill 695 people, injure over 2,000 more, and destroy 15,000 homes. And virtually no one will see it coming. This is the story of March 18th, 1925. The day a mile-wide monster disguised as boiling fog reminded America that nature does not need permission to kill. The day entire towns ceased to exist in minutes. The day children died in collapsing schoolhouses while their fathers worked safely underground. The day the deadliest tornado in history proved that sometimes the worst disasters are the ones we never see coming. Our story begins not with the tornado, but with a forecast. Or rather, the absence of one. The morning of March 18th, 1925, seemed unremarkable. Across southern Illinois and Missouri, people woke to gray skies and light rain. Snow flurries had fallen the night before, leaving a thin dusting on the ground that melted by morning. It was cloudy and rainy, unseasonably cool. Temperatures reached only 69 degrees in Carbondale, Illinois. Far cooler than typical tornado weather, the kind of day that seems too quiet, too ordinary for disaster. The U.S. Weather Bureau's forecast called simply for rains and strong shifting winds. That was it. No warnings, no alerts, no mention of the word tornado, because in 1925, saying that word could cost you your job. Because in 1925, the Weather Bureau was forbidden from using that word in public forecasts. Since 1887, nearly 40 years earlier, General William Hazen of the Army Signal Corps had declared that the harm done by such a prediction would eventually be greater than that which results from the tornado itself. So the ban killed all tornado research for decades. What Americans had in 1925 was nothing. No weather radar. No satellite imagery, no tornado watches or warnings, no emergency broadcast system, no understanding of supercell dynamics, limited telephone coverage in rural areas. In 1925, if a tornado was coming for your town, you would not know until you saw it, and sometimes not even then. But high in the atmosphere that Wednesday morning, invisible to everyone below, a deadly combination was assembling. Forces that would not be understood for another 25 years were converging. A deepening low-pressure system over south-central Missouri had created what meteorologists now call a triple point, the rare intersection of a cold front, a warm front, and a dry line. 3 different air masses colliding at a single point. Gulf moisture was surging northward, warm and unstable air racing up from the south. Winds at 18,000 feet reached 90 to 110 miles per hour, creating extreme wind shear that would twist the atmosphere like a wrung-out towel. A capping inversion, an invisible lid on the atmosphere, suppressed competing storms, leaving one isolated supercell to feed on all available atmospheric energy. Like a predator with no competition, it would consume everything in its path. The stage was set for catastrophe. But there was something else. Something that would make this tornado uniquely deadly. Something that would allow it to kill hundreds more than it should have. It did not look like a tornado. Witnesses across 3 states described it not as a funnel, but as an amorphous, rolling fog, boiling clouds on the ground, almost as black as night, a great billowing fog. The parent supercell had transitioned to what scientists now call a high precipitation variety, meaning the tornado was wrapped in heavy rain, hail, and debris. A tornado hidden inside its own storm. Because it was wider than it was tall, up to 1.5 miles across, It appeared as a rolling wall of darkness rather than a classic funnel. It looked like a storm front. It looked like heavy rain. It looked like fog. It looked like anything except what it was. Even weather-wise farmers who normally watch the sky, who could read clouds like other men read newspapers, did not sense the danger until the storm was upon them, and by then, it was too late to run. 20 minutes after Helen Thompson's first sighting, somewhere in the hills of Shannon County, the tornado claims its first victim. Samuel Flowers, a 49-year-old farmer with a keen sense for weather, a man who knew these hills and this sky, sensed something wrong on that unseasonably warm Wednesday. Something in the air, something in the stillness. As he rode his horse Babe toward home, the rumble grew to a tremendous roar. The sky turned dark. Large hailstones pummeled the earth, striking with increasing violence. Babe broke into a full gallop, racing against the storm. What happened next remains unclear, lost to history and the chaos of that afternoon. But Babe returned to the Flowers farm alone, her rider gone. Sam's body was found hours later, his head crushed beneath a fallen tree. This was the first of 695 fatalities, a number that would grow with each passing minute. By 1:14 p.m., the tornado had grown into a monster as it bore down on Annapolis, Missouri. The town's population was around 400. Station Master W.C. Gunther managed to telegraph a warning before the lines went down. But the storm was moving at 60 miles per hour, far too fast for any meaningful alert to reach towns ahead. At the small two-story Annapolis school, 25 children huddled in terror as the sky took on a strange, bruised appearance. The teacher gathered them around her desk to comfort them. Seconds later, the schoolhouse was reduced to rubble. Miraculously, all 25 children survived with only minor injuries. A rare moment of grace in the horror to come. But the town itself wasn't so fortunate. 90% of Annapolis's 400 buildings were obliterated in seconds. A marriage certificate for Nell and Osro Kelly was later found 77 miles away in Murphysboro. Osro was killed. By 2:15 in the afternoon, the tornado crossed the Mississippi River into Illinois. Behind it lay 80 miles of destruction through the Missouri Ozarks. 12 Missourians were dead, but Illinois would fare far worse. The tornado had been on the ground for over an hour. It was now traveling at 62 to 73 miles per hour, extraordinarily fast for any tornado. It was nearly a mile wide, and it was heading directly for the coal mining communities of southern Illinois. At 2:26 in the afternoon, the tornado descended on Gorham, Illinois, population around 500. It was throwing golf ball-sized hail. Witness Judith Cox described the moment in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. There was a great roar, like a train but many, many times louder. "My God," I cried. "It's a cyclone, and it's here." The air was filled with 10,000 things: boards, poles, cans, garments, stoves, whole sides of the little frame houses, in some cases, the houses themselves, picked up and smashed to earth. And living beings, too. A baby was blown from its mother's arms. A cow, picked up by the wind, was hurled into the village restaurant. Every single building in Gorham was damaged or destroyed. More than half the town's population was either killed or injured. 4 members of the Needham family perished. Margaret Brown, 13, daughter of the school superintendent, was reportedly cut in two by a large brass bell that fell from the school roof. A husband and wife were thrown some distance from their home, with shards of timber impaled through the wife's abdomen. One child was thrown nearly a quarter mile into the ruins of a business. One horse was found 2.5 miles away. 34 people died in Gorham. 8 minutes later, at 2:34 in the afternoon, the tornado struck Murphysboro, Illinois. Murphysboro was a thriving city of 10,000 people, a coal shipping center and railroad town. Schools were in session. Over 1,100 workers were at the Mobile and Ohio railroad yards. The tornado struck at its peak forward speed of 73 miles per hour, a record for any major tornado. Wallace Akeen was just 2 years old. Years later, he wrote that an invading army of debris swept over the western hill. Trees, boards, fences, roofs. Day became night. The house began to levitate, and at the same time, the piano shot across the room, gouging the floor and carpet where he had played only moments before. The walls began to crack as the roof ripped free and disappeared, but the walls and the floor held as the house took flight. Wallace Azua's son, his mother, and their entire home landed on top of their garage, which had landed on another house. His father lay unconscious near his auto shop. All survived. At Murphysboro's schools, the story was different. At Longfellow School, 17 students were killed when brick walls caved in. At Logan School, 9 children died when the building was almost completely leveled. At the high school, 3 seniors were killed when the central section collapsed. A clock on the wall stopped at exactly 2:35 in the afternoon, the moment the tornado arrived. Wilma Theis Kimmel, 17, was in gym class when teacher Alice Frost suddenly stopped, listened, and screamed, "Run, girls! Run to the dressing rooms." In seconds, they were huddled in tiny rooms as steel girders crashed down. The walls collapsed in an unbelievable noise, but the girls survived beneath the bleachers. At Longfellow School, workers from the Mobile and Ohio railroad shops, who had just witnessed 35 of their own killed, rushed to the school and began rescuing children. They literally tore their hands to the bone in their efforts. One young survivor was pulled alive from the rubble 2 days later. After the tornado passed, coal-burning stoves ignited fires throughout the rubble. With water mains destroyed, there was nothing to stop them. At the Blue Front Hotel, 18 people were burned alive. They had survived the tornado and were trapped in the basement. Rescuers could hear their screams, but could not reach them before the flames did. 40% of Murphysboro, over 150 city blocks, was damaged or destroyed. 2 days later, the Chicago Herald-Examiner ran the headline, "In the twinkling of an eye, Murphysboro was no more." 234 people died in Murphysboro. That was the single highest death toll in any U.S. community from a tornado. Around 2:45 p.m., the tornado reached DeSoto, Illinois. Population around 700. What happened at the DeSoto School remains the deadliest school tornado disaster in U.S. history. Betty Maroney was 7 years old. That morning, she wore her Easter dress because her other clothes had gotten soaked walking home in the rain for lunch. At 2:30 p.m., she went outside for recess. She could barely stand against the strong winds already blowing from Murphysboro. As the skies turned black, her teacher led students back to class, instructing girls to take their seats and boys to close the windows. That decision proved fatal for many. Because they were along exterior walls closing windows, the majority of the victims were boys. Tons of bricks crumbled and fell atop the school children. Betty lost 3 sisters in the span of 5 days: Tina Mae, Elsie, and one other. Her father survived but suffered serious head injuries. He died the following spring, leaving his pregnant wife to raise Betty and her siblings alone. Years later, Betty recalled that after the tornado was over, nobody knew where anybody was. You could be blown forever. 4 children were caught outside when the tornado struck. 3 young girls, Tina Mae Barnett, Ruth Taylor, and Nellie Bell, were using the school's outdoor toilet when they were picked up and thrown nearly 2/10 of a mile across the railroad tracks. 2 days later, searchers found their bodies in the outhouse wreckage. Betty's mother confided a haunting thought years later. "You know, it's worrisome to think that maybe they weren't killed. Maybe they starved to death." Jackson County Deputy Sheriff George Boland was on patrol when the tornado struck. He was lifted from the ground and disappeared into the funnel. His body was never found. 69 people died in DeSoto, 33 of them at the school. Around 3 p.m., the tornado reached West Frankfort, Illinois, a major coal mining town with a population of 18,500. More than 1,500 miners were underground in the shafts when the tornado struck, and that saved their lives. Their families were not so fortunate. When the electricity suddenly cut out, the miners climbed 500-foot ladders to the surface. They emerged to find a boxcar from an overturned train sitting in the mine parking lot. The landscape they had left hours before was unrecognizable. More than 500 miners' homes near the Orient Mine and Peabody Mine, number 18, were destroyed. Most of the 127 dead were women and children. The men had been safely underground. At the Old Bend coal mine, a barograph recorded the lowest pressure ever measured during a tornado, 28.87 inches, a measurement of the storm's terrifying intensity. At Caldwell, a mining village northeast of West Frankfort, storekeeper Isaac Carnes suffered the highest single-family death toll of the entire disaster. 11 family members were killed: his wife, his married daughter, his son-in-law, his daughter-in-law, and 7 grandchildren ranging from newborn to 7 years old. At 3:07 p.m., the tornado reached Parrish, Illinois. Population around 270. Parrish was virtually erased. 90% of the town was destroyed. Only 3 buildings remained standing. 7-year-old Vernice Criley was at her grandmother's house. When the tornado passed, her entire maternal family was dead. Grandmother, Luella Galloway. Grandfather, Frankfort Galloway. Aunt Beulah Price, 2 uncles, and her 19-day-old baby cousin, Jackie Jean Price. She was found in a creek bed, wrapped in the arms of her dead grandmother. Both her hips were broken, and she had holes in her head. She received little medical attention for weeks, and her broken hips began knitting incorrectly. She required multiple reconstructive surgeries. Remarkably, she fully recovered and walked straight without arthritis pain until a stroke in 1998. Parrish was never rebuilt. Survivors moved away permanently. 22 to 46 people died there. The exact number remains uncertain. Just after 4 in the afternoon, the tornado crossed the Wabash River into Indiana. It was bloated with debris and tons of river mud. What it left behind in the small village of Griffin defied comprehension. Peter Felknor wrote in his book, The Tri-State Tornado, "When the cloud had passed over a slight rise of land to the east of the village, it left behind a landscape that passed beyond the bounds of despair into unreality. The handful of unscathed citizens from Griffin and surrounding districts were confronted with destruction so complete that some could only guess where they had once lived. The search for family and friends had a special hellishness, as fires flickered over the ruins and the injured wandered about in a daze, mud so thoroughly embedded in their skin that identification was all but impossible. 60% of Griffin's population was either killed or injured. Not a single structure was left untouched. At Dr. Kokomore's restaurant, people had rushed for shelter. The building collapsed, then caught fire. Several of those trapped were able to talk to rescue workers before being cremated alive. 2 or 3 boys were never identified. They were recognized only by the marbles and pocket knives they carried. A man in Griffin reported that he grabbed a door handle and the house blew away around him, leaving just the door handle in his hand. At 4:18 in the afternoon, a full 3 hours after the tornado first touched down, it had lost none of its power. It struck Princeton, Indiana. Population over 8,000. It was bargain day in Princeton. Downtown was bustling with shoppers from all around, taking advantage of sales. The newspaper from the day before said, "Fair to partly cloudy with a chance of wind." When the funnel came into view, it was choked with debris. Residents in North Princeton saw a blackness move across the south side of town, but no one knew the southern half had been destroyed until injuries and bodies started arriving at the hospital. In the Baldwin Heights subdivision, immediately west of the H. J. Heinz ketchup factory, more than 24 homes were razed to the ground. The Heinz factory, one of the area's largest employers, was considerably damaged. George White, 18, was driving a grocery truck in South Princeton when he saw the tornado coming. He lay down in the bed of the truck. The top was torn from the vehicle. White was stripped of his clothing, hurled through the air, and sustained 3 broken ribs. Rescue parties found him and rushed him to medical assistance. Near Princeton, a locomotive was rolled by the tornado. It was a testament to the storm's undiminished power after 3 hours. 45 people died in Princeton. Shortly after Princeton, the tornado finally began to weaken, dissipating about 3 miles southwest of Petersburg, Indiana, around 4:30 in the afternoon. Total time on the ground was 3 hours and 29 minutes. Total path length was 219 miles. Total deaths were 695. Total injuries were 2,027. Homes destroyed were 15,000. In the immediate aftermath, heroes emerged from the horror. At Murphysboro, survivors from the M&O railroad shops, where 35 of their co-workers had just died, immediately ran to nearby Longfellow School and began rescuing children, literally tearing their hands to the bone in their efforts. At Parrish, a team of Illinois Central Railroad workers, led by a heroic physician from Iowa, pulled a train directly into the demolished village. The train was loaded beyond capacity with the dead, injured, and dying before proceeding to hospitals. At West Frankfort, coal miners who emerged from underground to find their neighborhoods destroyed immediately became rescue workers, digging through rubble to find survivors. At DeSoto, John Parrish's father heard what sounded like a freight train coming from the southwest. With his family only able to reach the basement door before impact, he deliberately fell on his wife and 5-year-old son to shield them from debris. He was hurt badly, but they were not hurt because of him. Hospitals were completely overwhelmed. 463 people required surgery in Murphysboro alone. Surgeons performed amputations as anesthetic supplies ran out. Improvised beds filled hospital floors, corridors, and bathrooms. Churches, lodge rooms, and schoolhouses became emergency hospitals. The most seriously injured were put aboard emergency trains to Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, arriving within 3 hours of the disaster. Help arrived quickly via railroad. The American Red Cross deployed immediately. The Indiana National Guard arrived within hours. Pullman rail cars housed visiting medical professionals. Tents supplied by the Red Cross created temporary shelter for thousands of homeless. Mass funerals were held with 5-minute services for each victim. In some towns, mass burials were necessary. Heavy rains 5 days later caused the Wabash River to flood, making Griffin accessible only by boat or railroad. The cost was staggering: $16.5 million in 1925 dollars, approximately $2.9 billion today. Nearly 2/3 of the property damage was in Murphysboro alone. 15,000 homes were destroyed. 57 schools were damaged or destroyed. With spring planting approaching, farmers faced ruin. Horses dead, harnesses destroyed, fields strewn with debris. When John Covert of the Indiana Farm Bureau called for help, International Harvester donated 20 tractors within an hour. These tractors, equivalent to 200 to 600 horses if used continuously, plowed hundreds of acres, assuring a complete crop in an area where all hope of a crop had been lost. Some towns never recovered. Parrish, Illinois, was never rebuilt. Survivors moved away permanently. Griffin, Indiana, rebuilt slowly. The schoolhouse, one church, and grain elevator were restored within a year. Murphysboro's economy was depressed for 20 years. The railroad repair center moved to Alabama. Then the Great Depression hit. It was not until World War II that all abandoned lots were rebuilt. To this day, the west side of Murphysboro is peppered with small backyard structures. The chicken coops and outbuildings served as temporary quarters while families rebuilt. Survivors instilled weather awareness in their children and grandchildren. Layla Hartman, who survived as a 4-year-old, recalled her father's response. The first thing he did was build a storm cellar. Every time a wind came up and there was lightning and thunder, he got the kids up. It did not matter if it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. To the cellar they went. Eileen Jones, a Murphysboro survivor, said 90 years later that every time it got a little dark, she would get hysterical. If it got a little black, she would worry. They used to have to threaten her to settle down. The 1925 tri-state tornado still holds records today. It remains the deadliest tornado in the United States, with 695 deaths. Its longest confirmed path was 219 miles. Its longest duration was 3.5 hours. Its highest forward speed was 73 miles per hour. The single community death record was 234 in Murphysboro. The single school death record was 33 at DeSoto. It crossed 3 states. 15,000 homes were destroyed. Despite public outrage, no immediate changes were made. The Weather Bureau continued its ban on tornado forecasting until 1950. The path to modern warnings took decades. In 1948, Air Force meteorologists issued the first successful tornado forecast at Tinker Air Force Base. In 1950, the Weather Bureau ended the tornado moratorium. In 1951, the Severe Weather Warning Center was established. In 1952, National Severe Weather Forecasting began. Today, the United States has NEXRAD Doppler radar nationwide and satellite imagery. The Storm Prediction Center issues outlooks up to 7 days in advance. There is an average tornado warning lead time of around 15 minutes. Wireless emergency alerts reach mobile phones. The United States tornado death rate declined from 1.8 per million people in 1925 to just 0.11 per million in 2000. The National Weather Service office in Paducah created hypothetical products showing that modern systems would have issued a high-risk outlook from the Storm Prediction Center, a PDS Tornado Watch, a particularly dangerous situation watch, by late morning, and multiple tornado warnings tracking the fast-moving storm. The December 10th, 2021, quad-state tornado through Kentucky, which followed a similar path nearly 100 years later, demonstrated this progress. Some areas had 20 minutes of warning. In 1925, there was none. To find the scars of the 1925 tri-state tornado, look for what is not there. You will find the scars on a field road that was once a lane, leading to a house that no longer exists. You find them when you see a flower growing in an odd place, a rose or a lilac that does not grow in the wild, but was planted by loving hands by the gate of a fence that surrounded a farmhouse that used to stand there. You find them in the gaps between old buildings in Murphysboro, where nothing was ever rebuilt. You find them in the storm cellars that dot the landscape, built by survivors who swore they would never be caught above ground again. And you find them in the way people in these towns watch the sky. Even now, 100 years later, when dark clouds gather and the wind picks up, people in Murphysboro, DeSoto, and West Frankfort pay attention. They remember what their grandparents told them. They remember what can happen in an afternoon. March 18th, 1925. The day 195 Americans died because the government was afraid to say the word tornado. The day entire towns disappeared in minutes while children sat in classrooms and miners worked underground. The day a monster wrapped in fog traveled 219 miles in 3.5 hours, disguised as a rainstorm, killing almost everyone who saw it. The day that changed nothing immediately, but everything eventually. A storm like it will happen again. The physics have not changed. The atmosphere still creates supercells. Tornadoes still form. The only question is when and where, and whether we will be ready. In 1925, no one was ready, and 695 people paid the price. Today, we have radar and satellites and warning systems that give us precious minutes to seek shelter. But even now, tornadoes still kill. It still destroys. It still reminds us that, for all our progress, we are still at the mercy of the atmosphere above us. Still. The tri-state tornado taught us the hard way. Its lessons are written in the empty lots and rebuilt towns of 3 states. They are written in the storm cellars and the weather radios, and in the way people still watch the sky, remembering what can happen when the clouds roll in. Their deaths led, eventually, to the warning systems we have today, to the Storm Prediction Center, to tornado watches, and to wireless emergency alerts, to the minutes of warning that save countless lives each year. Warnings. But it took 25 years. In the meantime, more people died. More tornadoes struck without warning. More communities were caught unprepared. 25. The tornado lasted 3.5 hours. The ban on tornado forecasting lasted another 25 years. On March 18, 1925, nature reminded America that some forces cannot be controlled, cannot be stopped, cannot be reasoned with. All we can do is watch, warn, and take shelter. And in 1925, we could not even do that. Nature. Today, we can. And that is why the 695 victims of the tri-state tornado did not die for nothing. They died so that future generations would have the warnings they never got. Victims. So that when the clouds darken and the wind howls, people know what is coming and have time to seek safety. March 18th, 1925. The day the sky opened and death rode on the wind. The deadliest tornado in American history. 3.5 hours, 219 miles, 3 states, 695 dead, and the beginning of the long, slow path toward the warning systems that save lives today.